Hello everybody and welcome back. So here we have water pollution and contamination, right? So this is actually a site in Mexico. Let's fix this. Cool. So I don't know exactly where in Mexico this is, but this is a body of water, right? This is a boat that is in the water that has been entirely filled with trash, right? Not well taken care of. Kind of a reminder that as serious as environmental issues can be here in the States, that we are still leagues ahead of what much of the world has to deal with. Awesome. So first, we have to talk about water and disease as a pathway. This is extremely important. Historically, when we come back to environmental engineering, we will see this again, and in other places as well, right? Not fun to talk about, but especially in the developing world and in places, well, if you go back to before indoor plumbing was common, right? Human waste was commonly exposed to soil and exposed to groundwater, right? And since we know a little bit about groundwater, we can understand how contaminants in waste, microbes, bad stuff, can be passed through the groundwater system to wells, right? We'll notice, right? This is kind of upstream, this is downstream. It's not a very smart way to build this, all right? But for a long time, there were no other options. This stuff just wasn't developed. There wasn't the resources needed to be smart about this. And so we have fecal matter contaminates the water. We get waterborne diseases, extremely common, especially in our developing world. Cholera, right? Dysentery, malaria. These two, dysentery and malaria, along with starvation, are going to be our top three biggest issues in the developing world, broadly speaking. Very different from what you see in wealthier countries. Yeah. This is a big issue. To come back to a case study, right? So we mentioned when we talk about ecosystem services and then with wetlands that New York City had this project about the turn of the century. They wanted to put, millions upon tens of millions of dollars to install this water filtration and treatment system for the city, in part to help reduce infectious disease outbreaks, things like typhoid, all right? Instead, they routed the water through the Catskills and through this big wetlands ecosystem. Wetland provides its service, pulls bad stuff out of the water, and as a result, right, of these developments, we have vastly falling infectious disease levels. All right, this is an environmental win. It's also an economy win. It's just a win all around. Great case study. Love to see it. A lot of small scale cases, right? And this is much more modern than what we saw with water and disease here. All right, this is extremely common even through the States, even through this year. Notice, all right, so it says soil contamination, but professor says it's water contamination. Okay, these are the same. We understand this now, all right? Groundwater in soil is what's getting contaminated. So they're interchangeable, all right? The groundwater flow, the flow of contaminants, is the same as soil pollution in this context. They form these things that are called plumes, right? So we have our source, right, which for whatever reason is dumping this stuff, all right? It sinks, in this case, all the way down until it hits groundwater, right? And it hits this zone where there's lots of water in between the soil particles, and then it spreads out. Now, in this case, right, flow is this way, all right, maybe there's some sort of, low elevation thing over here, or a river or an ocean, right? And it takes all the stuff with it and starts to spread it out all over the place. And so these people who drilled a nice well deep down into the water table, suck it back up and get the pollutant. This happens all over the place. There's a very famous case in Phoenix at the Motorola plant at 52nd Street and McDowell. The plume is still there, to be clear. There are monitoring stations around, right, in order to make sure that it doesn't spread, doesn't get worse, basically, to kind of contain it. But sucking it out of the ground is way expensive, and a lot of times it just gets left in there. It gets marked as being unusable to human beings and kind of left alone. Here we see it flowing in one direction, but a lot of times it'll spread out in all directions. It becomes like a radius around this thing. It's bad. Yeah, extremely common. Some of these things tend to float up to the top. Some of them sink to the bottom. The ones that sink to the bottom are way worse. Everything we would ever need to know about this for now. Microplastics. We've probably heard of these. I wish that I knew everything in the world to tell you, but this is very much still in development. Basically, this is still in nobody knows territory. All right. Less than 5 millimeters. This is not a great definition because bigger stuff tends to get noticed and filtered out way more than the stuff that is really small. But this is a fine definition. You also have this class of nanoplastics, which are like 1,000 times smaller than this, which are extremely common. I have a breakdown of some sources, right? So fibers coming off of all sorts of plastics, from nylon to other sorts of hard plastics and larger plastics, what they would call macroplastics, that degrade and shed microplastic particles. Just to give a visual, might be something like this, or we can use our human finger for scale. At this point, these are everywhere, not just in the water and soil, in living organisms, in people. Maybe you could find me a place where microplastics are not there. I'll put it in a note if such a thing exists. For a long time, these were also used in beauty products and health products. I don't know, facial scrubs and nice shampoos. All right. These were banned in 2015, but products don't just go out of people's homes. So commonly used in a lot of places. Despite the fact that action was taken, stuff tends to degrade into these microplastics, get into the ecosystem, tends to not be found by filtration systems. Why? Because it's so incredibly small and just hard to detect. And the exact impact of this is not known. It's definitely bad. It's just a matter of whether it is like marginally bad and like controlled bad or something else. But it's like the less you know, the more you should probably treat it like a problem until you know better, right? It's like if you don't know whether smoking is bad for you or not, and there's evidence that it is bad for you, maybe you should just assume that it is bad and stop, okay, until you know more. By the time you know, it's too late. Isn't that nice? Okay, one thing. All right, so our Pacific garbage patch. So this is not microplastics. Well, okay. It's complicated, all right? There's a lot of big plastics and a lot of little plastics. There's far more pieces of little plastics. Tends to be dispersed, not as easy to capture on camera. Most of what's captured on camera is going to be in the center of it, where it's highly concentrated, big pieces. But keep in mind, all right, if you were boating through this, like out here, the microplastic concentration would be really high, but you wouldn't necessarily see, bottles floating. As another fun fact, I've heard that Sprite discontinued their classic green bottle that they use precisely because they did not like the fact that people could pick it out of photos like this of landfills or of waste. I don't know. I'll put it in a note. Anyway, a lot of this is going to be discarded, either fishing equipment or maritime waste products, for lack of a better way to put it. Okay, what do I mean? It's like if you have a research vessel, there's a lot of stuff that just gets dumped out in the ocean, left out in the ocean, accumulates over time, all right? Maybe 50% of this is going to be from fishing vessels who fish and then dump waste, dump plastic stuff, stuff that they don't want. Are they held accountable for it? No. Something like 100,000 tons. It's a lot of plastic. Something like 500,000 square miles, right? So about 2 times the size of Texas, a very big and special state. Awesome. PFAS. So again, I am not like an expert on this in particular, so I'm going to limit how much I really say about it. It's also very much an emerging topic. I don't think that anybody really knows what to say about this or what to do. This is very much a sort of hot topic in the environmental world, at the state level, at local level. All right, it's big. These are per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. No, you don't need to remember that. The fluoro, because we got the fluorine. All right. Otherwise, these are going to be CNOH molecules. They keep coming back. Used in all sorts of things, but especially things like coatings and stuff like insulation, like for wires. These are the so-called forever chemicals that we may have heard of elsewhere, because why? Once they get into a person, get into the environment, they're there forever. As far as I know, they're never gone. Tends to build up. It's more an issue building up, again, in things that are smaller body mass, and especially in things that are consumers, right? It's going to concentrate in them, but can have effects on human beings as well. I looked around. I wasn't able to really get a conclusive picture, but at the same time, it's like if you don't know whether it's good or bad, you should assume it's bad, right? That's just called being smart. Awesome. Okay. Big ideas for the whole section. Whole unit. Where is Earth's water, right? We talked about that breakdown of how much is salt water, how much is fresh water, okay, and of the fresh water, how much is glaciers and how much is groundwater, okay, so on. Where is Earth's water, and how does it move between those different reservoirs, between those different places, from ocean to, right, rainwater coming down as precipitation, evaporating up, transpiring up, infiltrating down into the ground, flowing over all of the water cycle, right? The causes, the parts, how it flows between it. The important parts of water chemistry. So pH, hardness, and dissolved oxygen are going to be the most important parts. However, right, heavy metals is going to be extremely important when talking about human health and contamination. Nitrates and nitrides extremely important because they relate to our nitrogen cycle and our little eco columns. Awesome. Relationship between these three things and life and biodiversity is important. Aquatic ecosystem types on land and in ocean, where they are, what they look like, which is most important, where the life lives within those, right? We talked about life living in the shallow ocean, not the deep ocean. You need light to be able to penetrate to get photosynthesis in order to have that happen. It's also really cold in the deep ocean, and life likes it warmer. Broadly speaking, we talked about these shallow ocean settings right off the coast, warm, tropical waters, sun is shining, the family sugarcane farm is doing well. All right, you know the drill. All right. Lay down limestone, lots of life there now, and historically it's important. And then finally, contamination and pollution, right? Where it comes from, some examples of what the contaminants are, the effects that they might have, effects on human beings and ecosystems. And I think we've got it. Thank you so much.